All right, what is up, guys? Welcome. We are doing this class at all of your request. We get these questions a lot, and with the supervision requirements for supervisees and for supervisors, if you're watching this to try to figure out what has changed, I think this could answer a lot of questions. We have Maggie here, thank God, because I would be scared to teach this class myself. And I am excited because we have gone through questions that you guys asked most on our Facebook groups and through email and Instagram. And we're going to be covering all those questions today. When we get through them, any of you guys in here can also ask questions. We have a nice small group, and hopefully you can disseminate this to either your supervisees or your fellow friends getting supervised or getting started.
Yeah, can you make me co-host?
Super casual. Yes, I will make you a co-host. All right.
Yeah, we're casual, except I did make Liat actually have some notes, so I'm not going to be completely put on the spot every single time. a little bit of prep.
It's your favorite thing to do.
I love putting people on the spot. Yes, I do.
But I'm still ready. I got my coffee.
I actually need coffee, I feel. So here we go, guys. And if we miss anything, again, you could ask it at the end. So we're going to just ask some questions, have Maggie answer them. And I'll add in too if I have anything to add, but I know I actually think I'm going to learn from this as well. So here we go. Question.
A little bit of background, just so that people understand why you're asking me these questions. I've spent the last 2 years adjusting policy to update to the new standards. So I've basically been asking these questions to the board and waiting patiently for the responses and then answering these questions for a long time. So I'm not going to say I'm jazzed and excited to give you the answers because some of them are not super fun, but I do sort of have a handle on kind of what gets asked and how to expect to respond. So I'm going to share what I can.
Maggie, thank you for saying that. That gives some background. Guys, Maggie knows her shit, basically. That's what it comes down to. And she stays on top of her shit for the rest of us. So question 1, there's these new guidelines. And well, first of all, how new is new? Because I know, for example, from what I did a couple years back is different than it was a year ago. And then right now, the date of recording this video is January 27th, 2021, which is a permanent product showing that we're alive from 2020. What is up with these new guidelines? Like, where are we in the guidelines also?
So I think the thing to think about from this moment forward is there's been a lot of changes, and you could go back and make a nice, pretty notes timeline of all the different changes. But at this point, we basically all need to be ready that there are some huge changes that implement January 1st, 2022. So if you are beginning to supervise somebody now, if you're in the middle of supervision, or if you're starting your own supervision experience, you need to be ready for those standards because they will apply when you finish supervision. So we need to start that adjustment now. So we're talking about the new guidelines as far as the guidelines from the BACB that have an implementation date of January 1, 2022. But realistically, you should all be following them now. Like, now's the time. Last year was really the time. So we'll definitely provide that link. If you don't have it, that's also going to be the big piece of advice that I have for folks, other than ask all the questions you can, but read that document so thoroughly. It's really all you get from the BACB to help you make really good decisions about your supervision. And I can give you other kind of nuances that I've learned from dealing with the guidelines, but that's what we've got. So you need to memorize them. You need to be really, really on top of them, whether you're a supervisor, whether you're a supervisee. Like, they should be hard copy, tabbed up, highlighted up. You might even have staff meds for them if you're a supervisee. You've got to know these.
Maggie, is that the fieldwork standards document?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to share it in the chat for those that are here. And if anyone's watching this recording,
They'll all be in the YouTube notes on the
There
bottom.
we go.
We'll have
Nice.
all the links on the YouTube notes. Casey, we know how to say show notes, you know? We're gonna have it on our
Show notes.
And one thing I want to add, because I can't add it in terms of content for Maggie, but if you are a supervisee and you're here, first of all, if you're a supervisor and you're the one watching this, that's the kind of supervisors I like to hear about and see that you are doing your job, not being like, oh, well, I already passed, not my problem to have to deal with that. You should know because your name is also going off as signing off on someone else's hours. So that's on you and your license or certification. Next thing is, I think that a lot of people wait until they are studying for the exam to start learning about supervision and what all it entails. And like, I at least know in our collective, our classes to study for the test, that's like one of the last classes we teach. So it's just this idea that people go through their entire supervision process just getting by as opposed to really understanding what you should be getting out of your supervision. What are you responsible for advocating for yourself? What is your supervisor responsible for? So I really recommend listening into this and not letting this be your last stop in understanding supervision, because you are, I'm just letting you know, along the way going to have to advocate for yourself in terms of the quality of your supervision to make sure it's done right. It's on you as well as your supervisor. All right, that's the end of what I have to say.
That's such good advice. I think that's actually where I get frustrated is when supervisees are asking questions and they're like not able to go to their supervisor. That's the first person you should go to. Honestly, any of these supervision questions that you put on Facebook, like I love it. I'm glad you guys participated. I'm excited to talk about it, but these questions should go directly to your responsible main BCBA supervisor if you're a supervision student gathering your BACB hours. If you ever call the BACB, get ready for this phrase if you haven't started supervision yet. Every time you call, their response 99% of the time will be that's up to your responsible supervisor to make that call. So you definitely as a supervisor want to be up to date, but as a supervisee, that should be the first person you go talk to also.
Perfect.
all right.
Go, Case.
So what are some of the biggest new differences that are taking place in 2022?
All
Help
right.
me.
Lots of big differences, but let me break them down into kind of some main categories that you're going to see. Also going to like caveat this with my little ethics moment of I'm going to give you like these basic big changes. Guess where I want you to go to like get the details. Please go read the details in the fieldwork standards document. That this is just going to give you some new names and new jargon about categories, but you're going to want to go through and make sure you really know how these are defined operationally in that document. So breaking it down, big differences. First one is that our supervision period. So when we talk about any of these requirements that are broken up into supervision periods, such as you have to have a direct observation per supervision period, the new standards are talking about a month. If you got supervision earlier under different standards, you were probably used to a supervision period being 2 weeks. So now every supervision period is 1 month. That's probably our change number one. Change number two is the type of supervision experience you can have. Lots of us, actually, Leon and Casey, did either of you do practicum?
No.
Intensive practicum?
No.
So I did practicum and intensive practicum and fieldwork under the old standards. So we used to have 3 different options. Now we have 2, and they're going to be called concentrated fieldwork and regular or standard fieldwork. So no longer going to ever use the word practicum when we talk about getting your supervision hours. The 2 types of supervision experiences you can have now also are each slightly different. So in regular field work, you're going to need to accrue 2,000 total hours. If you are able to hit the concentrated fieldwork requirements, you only have to hit 1,500 hours. still a lot, especially for those of us that did go through an earlier type of supervision experience. That seems like a lot, but it's going to be so good for the field, because supervision is your time to really grow grow into a professional. You're going from a student to being an independent practitioner. So 1,500 hours for fieldwork, 2,000 for, I'm so sorry, 2,000 for fieldwork, 1,500 for concentrated fieldwork. The other big difference between those two types is the amount of time that has to be supervised. So in your 2,000 hour fieldwork experience, only 5% of those hours need to be supervised with your supervisor present there with you. Okay. Now we can do that remotely. We can be creative with telehealth, but when we talk about percent of supervision, that means that at the same moment in calendar time, you and your supervisor were interacting together. So that's 5%, and 10% is the concentrated fieldwork level. And then both of our experiences need you to be directly observed with a client one time per month. You will also need to meet your contact number requirements. So you need to have a direct observation of yourself with your client. And then you also need 4 additional contacts with your supervisor for field work, and 6 additional contacts with your concentrated fieldwork supervisor. So you're meeting pretty frequently throughout that supervisory period, or that 1 month. Lots of big changes.
Okay.
Awesome. So when you say that intensive experience hours,
Concentrated fieldwork,
oh yes, intensive field work, is that
concentrated. I'm going to correct you every time because
Yeah, no, I
our jargon has gotten so confusing.
Yeah, I need to-
Concentrated fieldwork.
is that kind of equal to what was the practicum?
I kind of think of them as like practicum and intensive practicum moved into fieldwork. Like you don't have to go to class anymore, but we still recognize that there's maybe a more intense way to accrue hours and a more leisurely way. But the class portion, so I don't want to bring too much practicum stuff because I just want to stop seeing practicum as a word out there in supervision land. But you had to get a grade. Under the new standards, you don't have to get a grade in fieldwork or a grade in supervision. You're just accruing those hours and meeting the standards with your BCBA.
Perfect. Awesome.
And what are the min and max hours per month?
That's like another huge change, which I'm really excited about because there's so much more flexibility now. So each supervisory period in each month, a supervisee can accrue anywhere between 20 and 130 hours, as long as they're getting supervised. I mean, you still have to hit the other requirements, but you're allowed to count anywhere between 20 and 130. And we even get a little bit of extra flexibility because we now have a really well-defined way of dealing with a month in which you don't do that. So it doesn't, a lot of us are like, you didn't even get 20 hours that month. I saw it happen a lot this year with COVID or with other, pandemic-y things. Let's say that you only accrue 10 hours. Well, the fieldwork standards actually have a way that we can still count that month. You're going to go through a couple of extra steps, but this is very new compared to our old supervision standards, in which if you didn't meet that minimum, you had to throw it all away, right? You couldn't even count it. Now we have what's called a prorating process. So while you want to aim between 20 and 130 hours per month, if you fall under that, you can still count some of it with a little extra documentation. Can't count over 130. So there are those overachievers out there. We don't have a process for that, but lots more flexibility in the way, or like the number of hours that you accrue each
That's a
month.
really big deal. That's a really
It's
big deal.
huge.
I mean,
It's going to make so many lives
better,
easier, I hope.
Easier. All right. Complicated situations. These questions come up all the time. I get these a lot in the Instagram inbox. I see them a lot on our Facebook group. And the question is, can you have multiple supervisors?
All right, get out your notes if you're taking notes. Yes, you can and probably will have multiple supervisors while you're accruing 1,500 to 2,000 hours. Please be aware of the difference in documentation that comes with that. So when you go onto the BACB website to get your forms that you're filling out with your supervisor, if you have multiple supervisors, you might be using a different type of official form. So there's two different kinds of final verification forms that you're filling out each month. One of them you're going to use if you have multiple supervisors that are all at the same agency. So if you have like a team of BCBAs that provide supervision to you and you work at a clinic, or you work at a school and you have two different supervising BCBAs, there is a form on the BACB website called a multiple supervisor at one organization experience verification form, or EVF, that you're going to use. And that's going to be different from somebody who might have more than one supervisor and they work at different places. So for instance, if I have a part-time job as a para in a school under a supervisor, and then I go work for a different agency and accrue more hours after school in an in-home setting with a different agency, different supervisor, then I'm going to use separate EVFs. So I'm going to use a single supervisor form to document each of those experiences separately. So it can get a little hairy. So make sure that you understand which type of multiple supervisor situation you're in. The last thing you want to be super careful with is if you end up in that multiple supervisor separate type of category where you're really accruing hours with one BCBA and then hours with a different BCBA, the BACB, and I think this doesn't come across very clearly in the standard document, but is super important. The BACB wants to see that you hit minimum requirements separately with each of those supervisors. If you have a direct observation in your para job for that month, you still need to have a direct observation in your at-home job that month. You can't count it as meeting the standards for both. That's different than if you do the multiple supervisors at one organization category, in which case only one of those supervisors that works with you or that team needs to give you that direct observation. So those are really, it can make your documentation very, very different. And you want to be really clear with your supervisor from the outset what type of documentation you're using. That's probably the driest answer I have for all of these things, but
No,
it's really important.
That's so helpful, Maggie. Like, just the way you explained it was so clear, and really, really important. So thank you. All right, next question. Can you accrue fieldwork and concentrated fieldwork at the same time?
Similar answer, right? So the answer is yes, you can do that. The documentation can get kind of hairy. So be careful with your paperwork and be careful with your contracts. If you've got a supervisor that's giving you concentrated fieldwork experience, your contract should say that one of the expectations is that 10% supervision. That's going to be different than your contract with the person that you are getting regular fieldwork hours with, because that contract needs to say 5%. So just be really careful in setting up those relationships that you've got your documentation down and those expectations between you and your supervisor are really clear. Also be aware that when you start doing that kind of creative juggling with fieldwork, you need some math skills. You're going to want to be able to do some weighted calculations. Remember, your fieldwork hours are going to count at a different percentage when you start to calculate how many hours have I done than your concentrated fieldwork. So you might want to make sure you and maybe your supervisor have at least the basic math skills to kind of do that calculation. And I also would suggest not combining them when you start your fieldwork experience. Like, getting the documentation down is a process. That's a skill on itself. You want to be fluent on being able to document your supervision, knowing how all your documentation fits together, what category am I hitting? Am I unrestricted? Am I restricted? All those types of questions and requirements should be completely answered for you. You should be fluent with those before you start to try to mix fieldwork and concentrated fieldwork if you can, because it's just going to make your math is going to get more complicated, and it's already pretty effing complicated process. It's not a scary process once you get it, but get that down before you try to do something out of the box.
Perfect.
Quick question, and I had this too, and I know I should probably just go read. but someone said too, what is the difference between fieldwork and concentrated? I understand the titles, but like what makes them different?
The biggest difference is that percentage supervision. So with field work, you're looking at 5% and 4 15-minute contacts per month. With concentrated field work, you have 10% of your total hours supervised, and you need to meet with your supervisor at least 6 times for 15 minutes apiece.
So it's really not, you could be working at the same setting. It's not the setting or something that makes it concentrated versus field. It's just the amount of supervision.
It's just the amount of supervision. Your activities categories are all the same. You know, how you're being measured, all that stuff should be the same. In fact, how you document it should be the same, except there's one drop down box that'll change from concentrated fieldwork to fieldwork, depending on which one you're doing in the tracker.
Gotcha. Thank you for that.
Perfect. All right. Next question. And this question is a hot question, and we get it a lot. And I know, Maggie, you've written a blog about this before. Okay. The question is this: can you use on the job, like on the pay clock or on the time clock, hours only when using your hours for supervision?
This is like, so the question about dry documentation categories is probably my least favorite. This is the one where I get really excited. So you do not have to be getting paid to be accruing supervision experience. You can use all off the clock hours if you want to, as long as your supervisor agrees with you and approves that these hours meet the requirements of being behavior analytic. So you can get super creative. I always say, like, it's a lifestyle. Becoming a behavior analyst is a lifestyle. So there's a lot of stuff you do on a day-to-day basis with your own life that if you're on site, I say on site, your main or your responsible supervisor says is helping you become a better behavior analyst, you can put on your tracker and you can accrue as experience. Skinner was actually one of the ones who was probably the biggest proponent of ABA applied to your own life and to self-management as a way to become a better behavior analyst. So short answer, absolutely, you can use off the clock hours. I did write a little blog, so if you want some ideas on how to kind of start incorporating those unrestricted opportunities off the clock into your contract with your supervisor or into your regular activities that you do with your supervisor, like, feel free to print that thing out, or I guess send them a link, text them the link, and use some of those suggestions. And then if you're really, really stuck, so if I have students who are supervisees who really are having a hard time getting hours, and they're willing, they're not afraid of work, go try to find some volunteer opportunities. Check with your special interest groups, check with the research labs if you're connected with any through your school. Reach out to Facebook groups, see if anybody needs some help with dissemination or training creation. Just because you're not getting paid doesn't mean it doesn't have a payoff. You're getting closer and closer to being done with your hours. So you might want to get creative and kind of see what else is out there that you could try applying ABA to. Because if you can, it might work.
I think that's really cool, guys. And Maggie's actually one of the first people that I've met that really understood it to this level of, well, first of all, obviously at STUDYNOTES ABA, we understand that behavior can be applied anywhere and it's everywhere, whether you want it or not. But I think it's a really good conversation to have with your supervisor about these creative opportunities beyond only working verbal behavior with a 5-year-old on the spectrum. Because as you know, behavior analysis could be applied to organizational behavior management, sports, fitness, shaping your spouse's behavior.
I always think we work with human behavior. So even if you're called in and you're the person who, I don't know, you got some crazy job where the only client that you really interact with is you have to be between 3 and 3.5 and have an autism spectrum diagnosis and all these very specific niches, you're still working with other humans. So ultimately you're going to have to understand how ABA applies to adults and to the people that interact with that 3-year-old and to the people that you want to interact with that 3-year-old, right? So the more experience you get with more applications, I really truly think is going to have a really positive impact on your practice, even if you stay really, really specialized.
I completely agree. Perfect. All right. Next question. Here we go. What about, and this one kills me myself too, especially as a disorganized person. What about all the freaking documentation? It seems like there's so much. What do I actually need to fill out? What am I?
All of it sucks, and you do it a million times.
Perfect.
It's not fun. So you need an official tracker. This is different and new, a new tool from the BACB that you're going to keep track of all of your accrual on. You also need a completely separate, unique documentation system. They both pretty much do the same thing. So it's going to feel like 2 duplicate sets of documentation because it is. All right, that's correct. If it feels like you're putting something here and then copying it over to another set of documentation, that's exactly what you're doing. We do have some cool tools coming out with CEUs by STUDYNOTESABA in our supervision course. We'll have a sample unique documentation system, a self-audit tool for your unique documentation system, and some other things to kind of help you keep track. But it's a lot of documentation. So this is the piece that I usually tell people to spend their first month, maybe even 2, really getting your documentation system down, and do it behavior analytically, right? Put some interventions in place, be a BCBA about it, put some prompts in place, put some self-monitoring and self-management in place, but get this documentation system down. The BACB also has a couple tools that you might want to bookmark or be aware of as far as keeping your documentation going. The tracker videos and update page should be starred in your bookmark tab. You'll go there a lot. The tracker tends to get funky and have little glitches, but they're pretty responsive. You can also use that same website or piece of the website from the BACB to submit specific issues you're having with your tracker. So you can screenshot it and everything so they can see exactly what's going on, and they're fairly responsive. I was for a while saying they were amazing and like you definitely use it. I guess it's gotten a little slower as people realize that it's out there, but it's still super helpful. So spend some time preparing your brain for the fact that you're going to have to wrap your head around all this documentation, especially if organization is not your thing. You're going to want to do that.
Find an organized friend who has done it or can help you. That's what I did when I was collecting my hours. Also, I want to tell you guys something that I would really advise that has not changed with all the new standards. And that is record as much information as you can. Initials of which client you worked with on what day, what time, when your supervisor came in to see you. You're not going to submit that level of detail when you turn in your final verification forms. But if you do get audited, you want to be able to prove you have your shit straight. So, and it will prevent a lot of issues if you are able to be like, oh no, on that day I was working with client SG, or however you keep your stuff HIPAA compliant. And so keep that for yourself as a separate thing. And what I would also recommend in regards to that, I know that I had been working at a company that was using Central Reach or whatever for scheduling, and the company got rid of it in the middle. So I would say keep your own Google Calendar, your own written calendar, your own agenda, whatever it is, with who you worked with, what session, when you got supervised. Do not solely rely on your company's database or wherever you're scheduling your appointments, because let's say they make a change or something crashes, you're going to freak out, as I did. So just
back it up. Always have
it up.
Another set. It's and remember that this amount of documentation is temporary. So you're not going to do this for the rest of your life, although a lot of these skills that you're using as far as documenting your time are going to be billable hour things that you're going to continue to do throughout your career. So it's not a waste, but it's certainly something that for, you know, the 2, 3, 5 years that you're doing supervision, it's going to be a part of your day-to-day. So make it a part of your routine, make it a habit, prompt it, reinforce it, you know, reward yourself, but get used to it. It's going to be something you do for a little while.
So question in the
Right,
chat.
everybody gets a quick tour of my house because I have to go grab my charger for my computer. So, but I'm
Do
still
you need a
talking.
supervision contract for each supervisor throughout the same organization?
Gonna tell you that my advice for this is yes. Whether or not you're going to get in legal trouble if you have more than one supervisor listed on a contract, I'm not going to go there. Check with, if you have real questions about contract law, check with a contract lawyer. But typically, to just cover your ass and have a really solid supervision experience, those contracts aren't just legal documents. They're also your way of having a conversation with your supervisor and making sure that you get what you need out of supervision. So if you've got multiple supervisors at one organization, I would have a contract with each of them that says what you expect from each of them, not as all of them. Obviously, all of them are going to help you meet these fieldwork standards documentations, but maybe one of them is going to be responsible for your direct observation every supervised period. I would want that in my contract with a supervisor.
Yeah.
And as a supervisor, if I'm not responsible for that direct observation, if I know that Liat is the one that's responsible for that, I'd want a separate contract that was reflective of that too. So I'm sure there are ways to get around with having one, but I would certainly suggest having really detailed contracts.
Oops, she froze.
She froze. Yes.
Oh,
The
someone asked a
more
question.
detail, the better. Make sure you have a legit contract. I cannot tell you how many people I've heard being like, I collected all these hours and apparently my contract meant nothing. Seriously, make sure you have a quality contract and it covers what the expectations are of your supervisor, what the expectations are of your supervisee or yourself, if you're the supervisee, whichever one you are, ahead of time. What you're going to cover, what your goals are throughout your supervision. What do you plan on taking from this? And I want you guys to know something that I wish someone told me when I was collecting my hours. And that is that, you know, you're like, I just got to get these hours. I got to collect them right now. I want to take the test. I want to take the test. I want to get through school. Like, you're always looking at the next step. I wish that I would have realized that, like, that is the training you're getting for when you pass the test to be thrown into a clinic or school or in home as the BCBA. I think a lot of people expect it to be like, okay, so I've done this. Now what's my next step of training now that I passed the test? This is it. And I'm telling you, imposter syndrome is real. So if you are thinking like, I just got to get through these hours, let me have someone sign off. It's actually just getting someone to sign off. First of all, it's not ethical. And it's to your disadvantage because this really is your opportunity for when they tell you to fly, as soon as you pass that test, and they will, you should have learned this during your supervision. So really take it seriously and realize that there's not this training program that happens as soon as you pass. This is it. They are going to want you to fly. So that's huge.
Great advice. Real quickly, when there was one more question in the chat, I think I got back to her privately, but do your supervisors prefer you to have completed most of your master's program classes before you start a contract with them? And I don't know, that's, I guess, dependent on the supervisor themselves, how they feel. I started mine when I was in my first semester of my grad program. I don't know if Maggie has a better answer for that.
Yeah, so the only BACB requirements are that you have started qualifying coursework, which typically is interpreted as a course in a verified course sequence. So you could start early as long as you're in that master's program. I don't think I've seen any pattern in what supervisors expect or prefer. I like newbies, but I think other people, would love to have someone who's got almost 2.5 years of behavior analytic knowledge before they start, especially if you're working with specific clientele, right? Really difficult cases. I don't want someone who's never ever seen ABA ever jumping in and trying to do that. So I think you'd probably find a wide range.
All right, Mags, how detailed do notes need to be on the UDS in Tracker?
How difficult do you want your process of getting audited to be?
Yeah.
Is the answer. I mean, you need enough information on there that actually not even you, that somebody who doesn't know you, right, an auditor who's completely blind to your situation, your specifics, can confidently say, yes, what she or he documented is not only an approved activity, but it meets whatever category requirements you said it did. So if I'm documenting an hour of unrestricted independent activity without my supervisor present, I'm probably going to put in a little bit of extra information about what I was doing. I might even attach a data sheet of, or I might even provide some additional backup documentation, like a timesheet that shows, yeah, I was really working with that client at that time. Or yeah, we were running DTT. See, here's my, here's the data from that session. So that documentation needs to be enough that that auditor can quickly check the box and say, yep, it would count.
Gotcha. All right. I think this is our last question. If I can keep track of all these details and all the stuff you talked about, how the hell do I stay sane?
Best question ever. One, buy an extra charger so you never hit a situation like I just did. No. I think being really prepared, recognizing that the supervision experience is something that you need to not just jump into blindly, that you really need to be ready for is important. We brainstormed a couple different activities and things, though. I'll let you ladies want to jump in. Self-care, I think, is so important.
I'm putting in this article that you had, we're going to post also to YouTube, but it's a time management blog. Maggie loves that one.
Like this blog, I should start like getting an advertisement for, but it's super helpful. Like, be realistic about your time, stay on top of your time, plan your time, use that pre-experience checklist and use it a lot. Like, don't just write it out at the beginning and say, okay, I'm going to aim for 100 hours a month. And then a year into your supervision experience, realize that you're way off track. Like, make sure that those things are something you check in with regularly. What else did we have? I'm waiting.
I think that what the big takeaway for supervision that I want people to understand is that exactly what Liat was saying, is that this is the time for you to learn these things. So be like an active supervisee, like advocate for yourself if you are a supervisee, that you want to get all the experience that a BCBA would do. And you want to do those things, like actually engage in those behaviors, help with assessments, creating treatment plans and data sheets and being hands-on, because it's only for your benefit, so that when you do become a BCBA, you're like, I've had experience in a wide range of things and I feel confident, versus you're still going to have imposter syndrome. We all have it. That doesn't go away. But if you had experience, that will at least help carry you through when you do become a BCBA and you're the one on the job, right? So I think that's a big takeaway. But yeah, that management.
I want to add, just because we do the test prep on this side over here. I know I said, and I really mean it when I say that, like, you will be thrown in as a BCBA once you pass. Like, you're waiting for, like, okay, well, where's my next level start? But additionally, and I get a lot of questions about, okay, well, I started my grad school and I'm collecting hours, but I want to start studying for the test. And I tell people always, wait till you're almost done with your hours, till you could really commit to studying. But also, I want you guys to know that you could be studying for free or killing two birds with one stone while you're going through your supervision. So you should be aware of your task list now while you're going through it. So look up right now, we will be starting the 5th edition task list as of, what's the date?
Well, it doesn't go into effect until 20.
You should be in that.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So start looking that over, what you need to know, because you could be learning. I mean, there's no better way for you to learn it than to apply it. So let's say on the task list, it talks about manipulating, motivating operations. You should talk to your supervisor and say, you know, I would love an opportunity to really, because I've, you know, or I was learning about this in my class. I would love an opportunity that we could talk about potentially manipulating the MO for little client Johnny, you know, just to, since we're working on him manding, and apparently that's a good way to get someone to, you know, manned or whatever it is.
And this is something you should be keeping track of as a supervisor too, for your supervisees. I get to throw it in there again. We do have a competency tracker that you'll get as part of our supervision course with CEUs by SNABA too. So make sure that you're not just haphazardly like accruing hours. You also want to be working through and making sure you get experience, like Liat said, in every activity on that dang task list. I know it's a lot, but this is your chance. This is it. Looks like work, and it is, but it's also an opportunity to get experience that you may not necessarily come across just organically or naturally the first 6 months of your
And likely you probably won't.
adult
because
job.
You likely will not come across naturally across a lot of it, because a lot of stuff is the gold standard, right? And we always want to do that. But also there's a lot of stuff that our text says for us to know, right? And I'm telling you now ahead of time, and you can be like, oh, I remember Liat said that in some YouTube video, that you are going to take the test and you're going to think, or when you get started with your job, like, oh shit, I've never, you know, given a, or, you know, assessed using a VB map, or I've never assessed doing this. So ask for opportunities to do that thing. Like, okay, in my class, we're learning about an FA, those, or functional analysis. Those are real things that are happening in really good clinical practice. So you should ask about it. And again, I know it seems like a lot, but you need to ask these things for yourself. Realize your supervisors are also trying to do a lot of things, right? They're trying to keep up with the things of their job, with their clients and this and that. So please be active in requesting these things. You're going to feel annoying, but you need to do it. You really, really need to do it. And that's probably the biggest advice I could give you, just as general advice, things that have not changed with the updates. Maggie has all the updates for you, but I could tell you all the things that I wish I had done when I was collecting my hours. So I think I'm gonna stop.
The only thing I would add is make sure, just like you would with your clients, like don't wait until you're done with your supervision hours to reward yourself. Like make a realistic sub goal, right? I'm going to accrue 10 hours this week, or maybe it's just, I'm going to document every day, but make those little goals and reinforce them, because you are building a new skill, you're building a new habit, and that's exactly what you would do with your clients. So do it for yourself too. You know, stock up, purchase yourself a bunch of stickers and give yourself one each week or whatever it is, but make sure that you're rewarding yourself. This is a hard process. It's totally worth it. I actually think the new standards are going to be fantastic for how we get to have relationships with our supervisors and really grow as professionals, but it'll be tough. So make sure you're taking care of yourself too.
Beautiful. I think we can end the recording on that.
I'm going to end the recording. And if anyone has any other questions, we could answer.